The real point of the black swan, ladies and gentlemen, is that these things that can happen to us are so myriad and so profound in their impact that, you know what, it doesn't matter how much we try and tame the world, actually, that middle circle may as well not be there, because our lives are going to be affected every single day by these uncertainties, whether we like it or not. So, why is this an issue? Well, at the basic level, of course, it frustrates us, don't we? Let's just be honest, we're all frustrated. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right down at the bottom there, we need food, we need water, we need warmth, we need our physiological needs to be catered for, and then we need a sense of safety. We need security and shelter. We need some sense of certainty. It's a basic need that we have. We need some sense that tomorrow will be like today, or at least that we can predict what it holds. Studies have proved this. Psychologists have done their favourite trick of splitting a group of people into two subsets, and they've given Group A quite large electric shocks, but crucially, they've told Group A exactly when they're going to strike. Group B, they've given much smaller electric shocks to, but they haven't told them when they're going to strike at all. So they just come out of the blue at random. And here's the thing. Group A, neither of them like it, but Group A are okay with it, because at least those shocks are predictable. And most of the time in our lives, we live in Group B. The shocks that affect us are unpredictable and uncertain, and we don't like that in our lives. And this is important because, as the Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert points out in his wonderful book, Stumbling on Happiness, we as a human being are an animal, and he makes a wonderful point in the book. He says every single psychologist at some point in their career will say the following line: a human being is the only animal that, right? And his point is the human being is the only animal that thinks consciously about their future. And it's a fascinating point. What he's saying is that every single decision that we make within the context of thinking, projecting ourselves into this uncertain future. Sometimes it's 10 minutes into the future, well, I'll prefer this bowl of soup or this chili con carne, and sometimes it's 30 years into the future, should I go to university or should I get straight down and throw myself into the job market? But we are always thinking about our future, and he says that the choices that we make are profoundly affected by the uncertainty of that future, and it is a problem because it affects us all. So I'd like to spend a few minutes just sort of getting to grips with uncertainty and asking, what is it? What causes uncertainty? Well, as I'm sure you can appreciate, we could spend the next 25 minutes alone, next 25 hours, looking at that through various different scientific disciplines. But I'm going to pick one cause for now, and that is Lorenz's butterfly effect. Now, this is talked about a lot and was particularly so about 20 years ago when I was a lad and I got quite interested in it. And it's often interpreted to mean that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can cause a rainstorm or a storm in Europe. And of course, that is the end game. That is the end result of the butterfly effect. But actually what it's saying is something I think much more interesting and profound. And that is that tiny little things, through a process of feedback, can have really massive results. And actually, more profoundly still, that the massive results and things that happen to us in our life are a product of the confluence of the myriad tiny little things that actually cause them without us knowing how. I have no idea how that butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can cause the rainstorm in Europe, but it does through the process of feedback. Now, that doesn't matter because I'm not a meteorologist and I have no interest in butterflies, but it is more pertinent when we consider that I have no idea how the little things that I have no knowledge or care to think about affect the big things in my life. We very rarely do. In fact, one of the few times that we really do think about this and get a handle on it is when something big and profound happens and governments spend a lot of money investigating exactly why. And if you think about it, the majority of the times when they make that investigation, the real cause of that huge, profound disaster was something very tiny, like a piece of metal that just didn't quite cover a seal. Or in the case of 3 Mile Island, a glass of water which leaked through a seal. Or in the case of Concorde, one piece of metal on the runway. These tiny things had massive and profound impacts. And you might say, well, you know, the Concorde crash didn't have a massive impact on my life, but it did, of course, for all the passengers who were on board and all their friends and all their families for the rest of their time on this planet. It ripples out. So I'd like to spend a few minutes now, if we may, just trying to apply that to our own lives. Obviously, I don't know the conditions of all your lives, so it's very difficult to make this specific and personal to you. But let's start off with this if we can. The sperm that fertilized your mother's egg was the winning sperm of over 300 million at the time. Okay? Now, what that means is that if your parents, or your parents' parents, or their parents, could happen, ladies and gentlemen, could happen, if they had met or mated just 5 seconds sooner or 5 seconds later, you would be a completely unrecognizably different person. Let's apply that to all the people that you meet on this world. If any of their ancestors, going back to the beginning of time, had met or mated 5 seconds sooner or 5 seconds later, then their impact on your life would be completely different, and the whole of your life, as you know it, would be totally and utterly unrecognizable. Change something tiny, have a massive impact. What if he had lived and he had died? What might the world look like then? Throw it around. What if he had lived and he had died? What if 7 months ago he, Tunisian fruit seller, hadn't had his utensils stripped away from him in a marketplace? He might not have set fire to himself. He wouldn't look like that. We might not have seen that. And that part of the world would look completely different for the next 50 years, possibly a lot longer than that. If he, Warren Buffett, had been able to operate his mobile phone in September 2008, he, by his own admission, would have received a message from the chairman of Lehman's offering him what he described subsequently as very favourable terms to come in and rescue this company. He might have done it, we might not have seen that, we might not see that, and the whole of our financial futures right now might look very different if one man could operate his mobile phone. Go back a little bit further. If the painter of that painting had been accepted into Austrian art school, maybe we wouldn't know him, we wouldn't have seen that, we might not remember him at all. Go back further still. If he had been able to have sexual intercourse with her without having to go through the rigmarole of getting married, well, we wouldn't have seen that, we wouldn't know that, and we wouldn't have seen that in the last 100 years. And if the wind had been blowing in a slightly different direction as that armada approached that coast, where you are sitting now would right now belong to that. On the plus side, our fans would look like that, our strike force would look like that, and we'd be the holders of that and that. So it's very different, isn't it? It's a very different world. You're laughing, ladies and gentlemen, but this is depressing. I'm trying to depress you. Because what I'm saying is that you are much less in control of your lives than you think you are. Your decisions are all you can do. They are a reaction to the maelstrom of the turbulence in which you find yourself. And as much as we like to think that we're the architects of our own condition, we're not so much. But we don't like that. There's a lot of people sitting there right now going, I think you'll find I make my own luck, Caspar. And there's a good reason for that. We are wired to want to believe that. They took two groups in a retirement home. They gave one group an awful lot of control and autonomy over their lives. They could choose what television programs they watched, their furniture, the flowers in their room. The other group had no difference in the quality of their life, but no choices whatsoever. They won't repeat this study again, ladies and gentlemen, because this group died quickly. We need to feel in control of our lives in order to feel complete as humans, and therefore we write a narrative which accounts for our experience of the world. What do we do in the face of this uncertainty? You know what we do? We predict things, of course. All of us predict things, whether it's the end of the world or whether it's who you're going to meet tomorrow. It's a billion-dollar industry. And before you start laughing at Nostradamus and astrologists, have a little think. There's poor old Michael Fish there in 1987 telling us that the winds won't be that strong. And it doesn't matter whether it's a denial of a hurricane or a barbecue summer, weather forecasters get it wrong, and they will get it wrong. And that's not to denigrate them, that's just part and parcel of the process. This is the Bank of England's forecast as to what growth would look like from the perspective of 2004 by 2008. And you can give it to, they've given themselves quite a generous latitude, right? These are top people working on this, ladies and gentlemen, and they've stood there in 2004 and they've gone, it could be anything between 1% and about 4.8%. And the actual result was somewhere here on this graph, down around the -6 to 8 area. We're not very good at predicting the future.